Save yourself the heartache.
Yes, perfect. Hey, Rand, thanks so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Nate.
So I'd love to jump in and get started. You've obviously had kind of a long career of creating a lot of different content to be helpful for marketers. And if it works for you, I'd love to kind of go back to the days of starting Whiteboard Friday, actually, is kind of where I wanted to start. And would love to just kind of understand, when you were at Moz and started creating those, like what went into that decision? Was it like a pre-planned thing? Let's map out this, genius series, or was it like, I just want to grab a camera and a marker and just do something and just sort of see what comes of it, and it just sort of snowballed from there? I would love to kind of start there and just kind of understand, what went into that decision initially.
Yeah, it was very much the second one. It was barely a decision.
Yeah.
It was really just a random series of events that turned into one of my coworkers. We'd gotten a video camera for something else that I can't even remember why we got one.
Perfect.
This was, pre your phone being good enough to do video.
Yeah.
And he ended up I think I was explaining something on the whiteboard to him and maybe one of my other coworkers. Remember, we were a consultancy still at the time. So we were doing consulting and software.
Yep.
And so I was explaining something to them, SEO related. He grabbed the camera, filmed it, put it online as a blog post, and it was really terrible content. Very, very low quality video. Obviously, I was not very practiced or well rehearsed on camera. The whiteboard was barely visible, all this stuff. But I was blogging 5 nights a week at the time. And this saved me one night of blogging on Thursday night. So putting up a video, which only took, a much smaller amount of my time each week.
Yep.
And being able to do it at the office instead of like going home and blogging from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. That just was, awesome for me. And so that's what started Whiteboard Friday. And then of course, eventually the series built up, in terms of quality. It built up the audience, and it eventually became, I think, not until maybe 5 or 6 years after it started, did it start to become the most popular content on the blog each week.
Yeah.
So it took a long time to grow. And, this is one of those like, hey, once you realize that you can invest less and get more out, you can make far smarter decisions. You and I were talking before the show about this like chill work thing. That's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. Like, geez, Rand, you're spending 20 hours a week blogging and like eating up all your nights and weekends. Is there a better way?
Yeah.
Oh, Whiteboard Friday was a better way, and it worked better for our audience, and it had better results. So, 1 hour instead of 20, I'd take it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes sense, earlier on that came out of resource constraints, because that's what you see a lot with early stage companies is there's only so much time to do what you need to do. And so that's really cool. And so at what point in that, I've been a part of, webinar programs or different things that like you do it long enough, you start to kind of wonder like, is this something we keep doing? So I'm just kind of curious if there was like, did you start tracking metrics around it of like, here's our most successful ones and we know which topics are performing? Or was it a little more of like just organic, like these are the topics that we're hearing chatter about or we're talking about internally, so we're going to make videos? Like, did it become more strategic over time, or was it still kind of maybe more process in how you execute, but not necessarily as much like planning and strategy on what they were going to be or how you were measuring performance, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, Whiteboard Friday basically fit into our general content calendar and strategy. So eventually that became more formalized, although I have consistently in my career rejected a lot of that formalization.
Sure. Yep.
My sense, I'm sure to the frustration of some of the more content strategy focused folks at Moz, was that my own intuition could often produce better results than a well planned out, well keyword researched, well
Sure.
targeted set of content. And that, that's not to say that I played both ways, right? So obviously the content team had a list of target keywords that they would like to rank for, and we didn't have content around that. And Rand, could you create something for this? And I absolutely did that, right? I told them, you, as CEO, right, I'm serving you. You tell me what you need, I will complete it. And sometimes that worked out well. Yeah. Oftentimes the most successful episodes were the ones where, whatever, I came back from a conference or an event, or I saw a trending topic on Twitter and I went, that is something that is going to resonate with a lot of marketers and will spread virally and will get a lot of attention. I'm going to make that video.
Yeah, very cool. Cool. And then, kind of zooming out a little more, I guess, like into just sort of all of marketing as you grew from the consultancy into software and just, built that up over time. I think Moz, was known for some pretty solid written guides around, link building and beginner's guide to SEO. And you and I talked several years ago about that guide to social media and some of those aspects. And so just kind of curious, like, where did content outside of maybe the Whiteboard Friday, was it sort of like we're all in on content, we'll invest as much as we need to make great content, or did you sort of have more strict budgeting or limits? Like, just kind of curious as obviously the CEO and then just broader within the company, like how investing in content, like what was that like in within the culture?
Let's see. It was a very content-forward company, and obviously that was, I think, culturally driven by the fact that I had started the company as a content hub.
Yeah.
Right? SEO Moz was a blog first, and then became a consulting company, and then a software company.
Yep.
And content was the primary driver of our traffic, which meant that it was also the primary driver of our subscriptions, right? Of free trials that turned into subscriptions of the software. I think the culture inside of Moz was very much a talent-driven one rather than a resource-driven one. So it wasn't, hey, content strategist, here you have $5,000, this month to create content. No, it was, hey, let's hire Cyrus Shepard. Hey, that guy's,
Sure.
Hell of a content creator. Cyrus, whatever you want to make, you make it. Whatever you think the world needs, great. You come up with a plan. You come up with your strategy. Brittany Muller, come on board. You create what you think is right. Russ Jones, right? Who tragically passed away recently. But, Russ was an incredible content creator. Dr. Pete, incredible content creator, still is.
Yep.
So, these are folks who basically I felt that they represented incredible talent in terms of what they could make. They had great intuition for what would resonate and work. I did not mind, and I am the same way myself, right? There was no like punishment and reward system, like, oh, your content didn't do well enough, and like we're not keeping you around, and that kind of thing. It was very serendipitous, and the way that I very much like to hire and incentivize people is basically I want to bring people aboard who have their own internal pride and sense of ownership and commitment to making great things, and they want that reputation for themselves that carries across their career, whether that career starts and ends at my company or whether it goes to lots of different companies. I think empowering people to do that is wonderful. So I don't have this like I know a lot of content teams have sort of almost a sales like quota and structure and format, and that's not me at all, right? I basically was like, I think of content much more as art than science.
Yeah.
And I want to bring great artists aboard.
Yep. Yeah, which is awesome. I mean, in the one sense, like you were certainly making huge investments in content, but instead of thinking about it as, well, how many, pieces of content can we make or things like that, it was, how can I hire the best talent? Which is very, very different from how a lot of people approach it, for sure. And I think the results you got were super interesting as well. Like, I don't know if you've read Who Not How, That seems to fit that really well, too, which is not like, here's our big plan, here's our big content strategy. You're a piece that fits into it. It's like, no, let's go find people and trust them, as you said, and be a bit more open-ended as to what they'll create, because then it's not just coming from one person, but really the collective mind share of all those smart people. So that's really cool. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I'm carrying that forward, obviously, with SparkToro, and I'm still doing a lot of the content creation, but Amanda Natividad, who's joined the team, as marketing architect, she's, she writes the newsletters, the one that went out yesterday, right? She does the office hours programming. She's doing a ton of the almost all the social content for the brand. And then obviously has her own profile and content that she's been creating and amplifying.
Yep. Very cool. Yeah. And I was just going to actually transition into what you're doing now with SparkToro, and I guess kind of any of those lessons you've learned. So you obviously just shared one, which is you learned from before, kind of bringing in smart people, letting them kind of run with it and have a lot of ownership. But I was curious, I've noticed now you're still seem very committed to video, because I see you're doing a lot of like really cool product walkthroughs and stuff on LinkedIn, and like and doing an amount there. So just kind of curious now with this company, and also just the fact that it's a audience research software, so you sort of have your own tool to have some unique perspectives and understand a little bit, like just curious how you're thinking about content, not necessarily from just topics, but also like which channels or medium you're approaching, kind of how you're going about it.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting, Nate, is compared to Moz, my content output at SparkToro is probably a tenth the size. So, if I produced, 10 videos in 10 weeks at Moz, it's probably one at SparkToro. And I am doing a little bit more of the, Ross Simmons philosophy of kind of create once, distribute forever. And part of that is bandwidth, certainly. Part of it is a strategic approach, right? Essentially being product-led growth rather than content-led growth from a marketing perspective. SparkToro, unlike Moz, is not free trial. It's forever free account. So a lot of what we try and do is make the free account really interesting and compelling, and give people a few quick insights. Like you do a search and you're like, oh, dang, I just discovered this that I never would have found otherwise. And I just got this great number, and look at these podcasts I found that I never would have found, and the social accounts, blah, blah, blah. And that has led to a lot of our growth, probably the overwhelming majority. Most of the content that we create is around supporting and bolstering the here's how to use this new thing, because audience research tools are, you can barely name another one. I could barely name another one before SparkToro.
Absolutely.
And so there's not a lot of education around how to use them and what to use them for and what problems are they solving and that kind of thing. So we're doing a bunch of that. I would say another big lesson from Moz is beyond the sort of quantity does not equal results necessarily, right? And it's been very surprising. This summer is a great example. So quick story.
Sure.
For the last 90 days, not counting the start of September, I've created a lot more content, but June, July, August were both the fastest growth months SparkToro's ever experienced. Probably the fastest growth months I've ever experienced in any business. I think we were growing almost 15% month over month, and which is just nuts, right? And so basically we're almost 50% larger in terms of customers and revenue in September than we were in May. Whoa.
Congrats.
That's nuts.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And thank you. Yeah, exciting. And also, I have never in my career produced less. Like
Yeah.
that period was probably the period where I did the least work on the business.
Yep.
And that has a little bit of, that can drive you a little mad,
Yep.
right? Because you kind of go, wait, what am I doing? Am I doing things that are the right things, or am I just riding a wave, or
Right.
what is going on? And so, from a metrics perspective, it can be a little frustrating to say like, hey, September is a good example, right? Already produced a few blog posts, a few videos, a lot more LinkedIn content, Twitter content, newsletter content. The office hours is kicking up. Like all this stuff is coming out. We're doing lots more marketing stuff.
Yes.
And we're growing at about half the rate that we grew at in July,
Yep.
which is still a very nice growth rate. I'm not going to complain about it.
Yep.
But that's weird,
Yeah.
right? That gives you a little bit of a strange, like, what's going on? Who's doing things?
Yes. And I think you're hitting on a point that's super interesting, especially as teams get bigger. I've seen, you continue to hire more and more people to do more things. We have a webinar program, and we're going to do X number of guides per month, and we need designers, and we're making videos, and so on and so forth. And it is interesting because there are some of those things, like you said, the way you're riding a wave or whatever. Like there are some of those things that I think are maybe bigger moments 4 to 6 times a year, but they really kind of continue to carry through over 6 to 8 week periods, and it starts to all kind of blur together, and you're all of a sudden this big content program doing a bunch of stuff, and it can get really tricky to pull the pieces apart and pivot it in any way to know what's actually working. Is it just the sum of all the parts? Is it some of these and we're actually wasting time on others? Like I mean, that, you think you're hitting on a really really key point in the challenge for a lot of companies.
It is so frustrating, especially in the modern marketing world that sort of Google and Facebook have dominated, where the platforms provide such frustratingly little amounts of data on what is organically helping you succeed, right? In the early years of Moz, we could look at which keywords, right? Because Google gave you the keywords for every visit that came to your website. We could look at every keyword that sent a visitor, and we could cookie them for basically their whole life. And so we could see, okay, the average person visits Moz 7 times before signing up for a free trial. And these keywords are the most productive for us. So let's rank better for those, and let's put more effort into these ones. Now you can't see that stuff. You can't cookie someone forever. You don't get keyword data. Instagram sends no referral data. Facebook hides a bunch of its referral data. Google hides a bunch of its referral data. Twitter is pretty good about sending you info. LinkedIn hides its referral data. So you're kind of up this creek with no paddle. Attribution in organic is near impossible. And what happens? Well, attribution in paid is just beautiful and pristine and perfect. And Google is happy to compromise all the things they say they care about in privacy, as is Facebook, once you start paying them for traffic and ads.
Yeah.
Which is, infuriating and feels like it should be illegal, but whatever, right?
Yes.
How are we going to affect policy at that level? But the reality comes back to, if you are a content creator, a content strategist, a content marketer, a CMO, a CEO, who's a founder who's trying to determine where should I put my budget and my time and my energy, this will drive you insane.
Yes.
It absolutely will. And the answer is, there is no clear, obvious path to do it. Anyone who tells you that there is selling you a load. There are ways that you can start to do time series work and experimentation, but until and unless you're willing to do the 2 things almost no company is willing to do, which is, number 1, cut off your ad programs entirely for a long period of time and see how that affects you, right? Yep. So like, we're cutting all of our Google paid ad spend. We will bid on no keywords. Let's see what that does to our traffic and our conversions. Do people find us anyway? Were most of them going to buy from us anyway? Is it 90%, 80%? We don't know. Until you do something like that. And the same thing on the organic side. we're not going to do any content production for 90 days. We're going to see what happens. How does that affect us? And is there a lag between when we produce it and when it, has high efficacy in terms of converting?
Correct. Yep.
Nobody's willing to do that. That's the only real way to get answers. So you get in a weird position.
Yeah. And yeah, totally agree. That's how so many people end up deferring to, just ending up on the hamster wheel of paid.
Yeah.
Because it's the clear data,
because you can prove
easy
it,
return.
right? You can show your investors and the people you're fundraising from, and you can show your team, you can show your boss, you can show your client. Oh, look, Google sent us this many visitors. We paid this amount. Look, we got a slightly higher ROI. We paid slightly lower CPC. Let us keep improving this for you. Beautiful. And of course, what if you experimented and you cut that off entirely and you saw, hey, we still get 95% of the value, and it's costing us, 1/100th of the price to do it organically. Why are we doing this? This is madness to be bidding on this. Well,
yeah, I hear you. Yeah, and it's especially like I think so much of that comes down to who, who's leading companies that you're working for, and how much of an uphill battle it is, what their perspective is on marketing. I remember, way back, I guess over 10 years ago now, talking to Justin before joining Sprout Social, and just saying like, I think, organic search is going to be huge for this business. And him saying, I completely agree, I want to go big on it, was huge. Because then it was like, I don't need to read an article about how to convince your boss that SEO is important. I don't have to read it because he already believes it. And and so I think that's such a huge thing for people in content and just all those channels to understand the perspectives of leadership and the company's perspective on it, and if it's a content first company like you said before, or if it's just going to be an uphill battle of trying to prove direct ROI on every single thing you do, which is, like you said,
I sort of feel like either you're joining a company that already believes in serendipitous, sort of artistic style, creative style marketing investments.
Yep.
In which case, fantastic, right? You know what your roadmap is. It's driven by your intuition. You use your best senses and you feel your way through what's going to work. Or you are at a company that demands attribution for everything, in which case, screw the creative side, screw the organic side, forget about this whole, maybe content isn't the right thing to do unless it's content that you're going to do paid amplification for, and just invest in paid channels and optimizing those, right? And play that game. Mm-hmm. Because very frankly, even if you do an extraordinary job with your organic side of stuff, it will be very difficult to prove that that's what moved the needle. And if your boss, client, team doesn't believe in it, you're not going to get credit and you're just going to feel frustrated, right? So that's like an emotional journey you don't need to go on.
Exactly. Totally. Save yourself the heartache.
Save yourself the heartache. So this should be the title of our podcast together. Save yourself the heartache.
Yes, perfect. Cool. So I know we the goal with this podcast is not just like what is the revenue generated from content. How is content growing revenue? It's there's also brand and authority and all this stuff. So the other piece I wanted to touch on was just the time. You've obviously spoken at hundreds, I assume, of conferences at this point.
Probably, yeah.
And then obviously authored the book, Lost and Founder. So just kind of curious, as you can look back now over a longer period of that, especially the conference speaking, how much of a role do you think that played in sort of like elevating you as an authority, and kind of giving you a bigger platform, or was it, was there something else you just loved doing it? Were you sort of looking at how that could kind of help the company, or were you thinking about it more from a personal brand perspective? Just kind of curious, on all of that.
Yeah, so for a lot of my career, I assumed, perhaps foolishly in retrospect, that Moz would be my company forever, right? That I would never leave, and hey, I'm happy to put in whatever 30 or 40 years here, and that's my career. Love
Sure.
it, that kind of thing. Drop out of college, make a company, stay there for life.
Yeah.
But obviously, that is not how that went, and I have lots of regrets about all sorts of things related to Moz, but hopefully get to repair some of those strategic errors and company design errors with SparkToro.
Sure.
In terms of the conference speaking stuff, there were three things that really drove it. So one was a personal pride one, like
Sure.
I want to know that I am good enough to get on a stage, present on a topic, around digital marketing stuff and at the time SEO stuff, and to the best of my ability, be the top rated speaker at that event.
Sure.
Right. That was like always my goal, was be the top rated speaker at every event that I went to. And many times I was able to achieve that, and sometimes I didn't. And I think later in my career, the more I didn't get it, the more I was like, oh man, look at these amazing other people. I'm going to hire them, work with them, put them on my platform, get them to write for me, all that kind of stuff. So it was almost more of a gift when I found people who did better than I did. And then I think the second piece was the immense value that comes from being able to spend lots of time in person with lots of marketers who have a broad range of opinions and views and challenges that they're facing. I don't think there was anything better for my product development mind than the empathy I gained from spending time talking to people in person at their offices, at a conference hall, over lunch, over drinks, over coffee, whatever, about what they were working on and what was frustrating, and then hearing other people's talks and seeing what resonated with the audience and being like, oh man, gosh, this problem of crawling an entire website and like finding all the broken redirects or something, like, my God, look at the hoops that they're willing to jump through with Screaming Frog to do this. Moz should just do it every week for you and like put it right in your report, and we'll be like, hey, here's the broken ones. Here's the ones that have external links. Here's the ones with the highest page authority. Here's the ones that got the most traffic. Like, go fix these, right?
Yeah.
Whatever, that kind of stuff. For SparkToro as well, a ton of what I did the first 18 months of this company before our product even existed was just spend lots of time with marketers like you, right? Just talking about the problems of audience research and audience intelligence, and like, hey, how do you figure out, media planning and which social accounts are going to amplify your stuff, and which websites to pitch, and doing digital PR. Like, how do you figure that out? And the answer was a lot of manual work or no research at all, just guessing and like Googling around. So you're like, oh, okay, maybe this is a problem that could be solved. And it's looking pretty good so far. So I think that was number two. The third one was much more personal, and that was I love to travel. So, for a decade, almost 12 years, maybe I think 11 years, as an example, I flew out to Germany and spoke at SMX Munich, which is like one of the biggest conferences in Europe for search marketing and digital marketing in particular. And to be honest, like, the two biggest reasons I went is because I really like the organizers, Sandra and Matthew Finley, and because Geraldine, my wife's father, lived south of Munich. And so basically every year we would go see him, and, I got to write off my flight and the hotel, and that was, that was really great. We basically got to see him the last 11 years before he passed away a few years ago. And that was, I don't think Geraldine would have had the relationship she got to have with him at the end of his life if it wasn't for that. And
wow.
I mean, in a way, that is more meaningful than any of the business results, right?
Totally. That's really cool.
Jews are treated very well in Germany these days. I freaking love going to Germany. You get on stage and you're like, hey, look how great it is for Jews here. And the Germans are very good about not laughing at jokes. They're just
Awesome.
Yes, this is a good place for you to come and be Jewish. We welcome you in our homes. Great.
Excellent. Yeah. No, that's really cool. Especially, yeah, that third point is neat. I was going to say though, I wouldn't have actually thought of that second point though.
Yeah.
Like that is fascinating. The amount of like, audience and customer research that you're essentially just getting from being immersed in that. I mean, because yeah, the reality is most CEOs and product leaders are not getting to be in large crowds of their target audience dozens or more times per year or whatever it might
and
be.
You get to see, you can watch the crowd like from the back. Someone's giving a talk about solving the problem that you want to create a product to solve.
Yep.
And you can watch the crowd like engage, or like, they don't care about this, or they really care about this. And then you can talk to people who ask questions about it during the session, and you can talk to the speaker and see their views are on the topic, right? And so you're meeting and connecting with all these influential people who are talking about the problem you're trying to solve, and people who have the problem directly, who came to these sessions to try and solve their problem. It is, I don't know of another way to get that range of exposure. This is, I would say, one of the most frustrating parts about like the COVID era of online events is you just can't do it quite the same way. Although the workaround that we have now is kind of the office hours thing.
Sure. Yeah.
So, we have this like bi-weekly webinar that Amanda and I run for SparkToro, and it's very much like the SparkToro community of people who use the product, either the free or the paid version, and kind of are curious about audience research and all the direct and indirect challenges that it solves. And so, yeah, the Crowdcast, which is the platform that we use, has a really good like chat interface. I don't know why it is, but there's a ton of activity every week when we jump in there.
Yep.
And Casey, who's my co-founder and sort of the CTO, chief engineer for the product, like he gets a lot of value just from seeing folks talking about whatever we're discussing in the webinar too. Yeah.
Oh man, that's awesome. I love that. Cool. So I think one thing I was just kind of wondering, so now, I guess kind of moving off of specifically conferences and the book and some of that, like, is there maybe one or a couple things that you would sort of distill down that you've learned from like all of the content that you've created and produced? I think you mentioned earlier, I'll kind of give you an answer and you tell me if you don't want this as your answer, but you mentioned earlier that you sort of learned like maybe less is more in some of those cases, and not about like, it's more about quality and not quantity. So I know that sort of stood out, but kind of anything else that you've sort of learned or bigger lessons along the way?
I would definitely say, so I think there was an era from 1996 to about 2016. So you got a nice like 20 years in there where content creation of reasonably high quality on a particular topic was a wonderful way to build a brand, get people to know you, earn traffic and attention through search engines and social networks and links all over the web and people covering you. And that was pretty cool. And I think my last 5 years, I believe that era is not entirely over, but the window's closing. That is for three reasons. Well, one is the platforms themselves have an incentive to keep you on the platforms.
Sure. Yep.
Right? Google used to send lots of traffic out. Now it tries to keep as much traffic as it possibly can on Google.
Yep.
I don't know if you saw the recent update to, I think it was hotels and restaurants, where they're no longer, when you click on a local listing, no more website link.
Yep.
Yeah, goodbye website. Which is, I mean, as a searcher, effing infuriating.
Yes.
Because we all know that like the best, especially during COVID, like you want to go to the actual website and like see all the details because you don't know what's going on. Anyway, blah, blah, yada, yada. But second, so first, right, platforms, incentives. Second, the level of competition. So for those first 20 years of the internet, there just weren't enough people creating great content around each topic. And so you could really stand out.
Yep.
if I were to do what I did today with the SEO Moz blog, you would never hear of me. Like,
Right.
no way,
Yep.
no way. It's just it's not that the stuff just wouldn't stand out from the crowd of 100,000 professional SEO services firms that are all creating content, right?
Yep.
It would never make it.
Yep.
So competition is the second one. And then the third one, I think, is I think that the social platforms in particular have trained us, and Google too, to a certain extent, and YouTube, trained us to be resonant with emotional drivers of content and emotional short form, very snippety, engaging entertainment plus like politics plus play against our angers and fears. And so that's what we're used to consuming and amplifying on the web instead of, oh, this is a really great guide about chemical engineering.
Sure. From someone who's a strong authority.
If you go back to the web of 2008, I would make a really cool guide about whatever retail e-commerce landing page tactics, and lots of people would share it. Today, I could create that guide. It could be 100 times better. People might consume it. They might appreciate it. But would they share it? No. Because culturally, that's not what we've become used to sharing on the web. We've become used to sharing, I don't know, here's thing that supports my political belief. Here's thing that will make people who, I don't know, don't support thing that I support angry. That's what we amplify. That's what we're used to sharing and promoting. That's what Facebook and Twitter and Reddit and all these places have encouraged us to do. So those three forces are making this window close.
Yep.
And I think that is a really important thing for content creators to remember. And it means that you are going to have to play a different game to earn and grow your audience than you will to serve them. It's almost become like a bifurcated system, right? I create emotionally resonant, snippety, high engagement content to draw people in.
Right.
And then my content, my like serious content that keeps people around is more delivered through like an email newsletter subscription or, a weekly webinar series or whatever it is, right? That they're sort of subscribing to. So it's like
educating and
just a totally different game. The great content does not earn great amplification anymore.
Right. Yep. Awesome. That makes a ton of sense. So this would be a good segue.
So what you got to do, Nate?
Just make TikToks.
Save yourself the heartache.
Yeah, there you go.
Save yourself the heartache.
Yeah, exactly. So that transitions well because I'm curious, like what. Maybe there's not a particular one, and that's fine. But is there a content channel or format that you are particularly bullish on, sort of now and over the next few years?
There's two. I think short form video is extraordinary, even when it's on more boring topics. For some reason, again, people are like used to a 30 to 90 second short clippy video with like fast cut edits and I don't know, some engaging like eye contact with the camera and and a bit of emotional resonance. Works well. Like it honestly does. For example, this podcast that we're recording right now, if you take a snippet of you and I chatting for 30 seconds and you overlay like the text annotations and you share that on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn and then have the link as a reply to for the podcast, for the full episode, that will perform vastly better than like, here's a picture of Nate and Rand. They were together on the podcast, watch this interview. So that format, that content format, I'm hugely bullish on. I've seen extraordinary results, especially on LinkedIn. Of all places, like native video on LinkedIn, they've started giving a bunch of video analytics around it, and it's pretty extraordinary. I put up a video like the day before yesterday, and it has 2,200 minutes of watching time for a 90-second video already.
Wow.
I was like, oh, dang, that really worked. And it's kind of a promotional video about like how to use SparkToro for a thing. So that's wild. The second one that I'm bullish about is episodic content. So, for example, your content that grows podcast, right?
Sure.
If someone watches this episode and they think to themselves, dang, this is great. Nate has great guests on. He asks good questions. Like, I love the responses, blah, blah, blah. I should go check out the back catalog.
Yep.
That is hugely powerful. I think episodic content, whether it's video series or webinar series or an email newsletter series or a blog series, as opposed to just individual blog posts that sort of stand alone, that type of stuff really, really works well in comparison to, like, you know, historically the one-off, like, let me make a guide about this and a content piece about that. And
which, I guess to your early point in terms of like conditioning within society, like that also makes sense. Like the amount of binging and whatnot around.
Yeah, like we're used
every
to Netflix,
possible show,
right?
Yeah.
Like I watch. Yeah. Oh man, I watched. we started the new season of Sex Education, and it just emotionally wrecked me like 2 nights ago. But yeah, that's that's what we're used to. We're used to like binge watching episode after episode of the same show, and then like, okay, I want to get another show like that, and find the episode that resonates. That I think that works well in content world too.
Yeah, cool. Short form video, episodic content. So awesome. Cool. So I have one more question before I do. If you enjoyed this episode, I visit 10speed.io/podcast for the show notes. Make sure you subscribe to get the future episodes, as Rand said. And please tell any other marketers that you know about this podcast. So Rand, to finish up, any final advice or encouragement for marketers or content creators who want to invest in content to grow their company? Any advice you would have for them?
Yeah, friends, if you are listening to this podcast or to any of the other ones that Nate's done around content formats or structures or platforms or whatever, and you think to yourself, TikTok is so hot right now. Like, I got to get on TikTok, but I hate it, and I hate doing video like that kind of format, and I don't know if it's for me. Let me tell you, let me just save you some more heartache. I have never in my career seen a founder or a team or a CMO or an agency who says, I hate doing this type of content for this platform, but I'm really good at it and it works really well for us. Nope, never seen it. So if you think, gosh, I really dislike this platform or this content or, whatever. I hate Facebook's whole structure and everything about them. Fine, just ignore that platform. Focus on something that you do like that resonates with you. That might be, I like participating in Reddit comments. Well, there's bajillions of people on Reddit. You can do very well there. You are great at LinkedIn. Fantastic. You're very image and visual focused. Fine. Make your content very visual, focus on like Instagram and Pinterest and sharing your visuals on Twitter. You can do it on LinkedIn, right? Like, whatever works for you. It's not necessarily about what you think is the best opportunity. It's the combination of an opportunity to reach your audience and you can provide unique value there and you enjoy doing it. If you get those three things going for you, that is where I have seen tons of founders and teams and agencies have a lot of success. And when one of those three elements is missing, it tends not to go so well.
Yep. Awesome. Love it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you spending some time with us. This has been an awesome conversation. Thanks again for joining.
My pleasure, Nate. Thanks for having me.